Call the Budget Review Committee to order. 2024 at 7 p.m. We're in the Aldermatic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Derek Tebow.
Here.
Alderman Tim Senate.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present, and our chairman Richard Dowd. Also in attendance is Alderman Timmons, Alderman Gaveva, and Alderman Clay.
Okay. First item on the agenda is public comment. You have 3 minutes to talk to any item that's on the agenda this evening. And there's only one item on the agenda.
Laura Cahoon, 30 Greenwood Drive. I'm here tonight. I think this is totally wrong that we should put another $8.5 million on the taxpayers. Just because we got $45 million that the school district was given, and they overspent on that. And if you look at how it's broken down, it's salaries, it's Social Security, retirement, and everything else, which should have gone through the budget. However, the budget is $5.5 million where we still have it. That is usually, taken into consideration, and the mayor will come up and spend it on other things. I think that $5.5 million should be transferred into this account to pay off for the school renovations. Also, as far as the roof is concerned, it is unbelievable that the city got an estimate, and the estimate did not include taking off the old roofs. I don't care how stupid you are. I mean, I don't do roofs, and I know they've got to come off. So, $2 million, go out and get a new bid. That's it.
Anyone else public comment?
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I think I'm going to focus on the process, on how this all went down. It wasn't long ago at a budget meeting or a special hearing that you came out, Alderman Dowd running it, saying, hey, board members, you got to vote for this tonight. We have a shortfall, $4.5 million. We need to pay the bills, and we need your approval right now. This city has perfected the art of the ambush and surprise tactics. You do it beautifully. And it's done and played out over and over again. I see it with Director Cummings frequently coming in here the night of something and saying, here we are, I need you guys to vote tonight, we've got to make a decision right now. It's not fair, it's not reasonable, particularly when there was a major mismanagement or miscue of the money. And I would like to know and hope that I'm here tonight to find out when you or anyone became aware of this, because the school renovations, I believe, were done over the summer. So when were the renovations done? When did we figure out we had this shortfall of money? Who was contacted in City Hall about this shortfall, and when? And why did we wait until 3 weeks ago or a month ago to hold a hearing to say, uh-oh, 4-alarm fire. 4-alarm fire, we need to bond some money, serious money, and carry this debt. I mean, an alderman described this as a bailout bond, and I agree, it is a bailout bond. But we should have some answers, and we should have some accountability on what happened. I'm not a big believer on taking on more debt, and I'm happy to see that there's a committee, an ad hoc committee being formed to address projects and planning over the long term. I think that's a good thing. I'm not certain I approve the makeup of the committee. I don't know if we have enough voices of opposition or voices that will challenge what's going on there. So, and I can't remember who all is on the committee, but when that happens, we'll see how that plays out. But I think you owe us a lot of answers. I think you owe us some accountability of the numbers. I don't know if this actually is going to get voted on tonight. I couldn't really tell. It's just a one thing. So I look forward to hearing the discussion and understanding what went on here. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Paula Johnson. I'm a former member of many boards here. person whose election got stolen this year. I was on the board back when all this was voted on. I asked questions in the budget committee because I was the chair, and people asked me why I didn't vote on the budget because I couldn't. I didn't believe in the budget. I do have some of the answers to some of the questions right here because I went to the proper people to get the answers and everything, but maybe nobody else did. I think it was back in May, June, that members in the school district found out about it. I didn't find out about it, I didn't know about it. I was in shock about this whole thing. And then I went back to listen to the budget committee meeting because I knew I questioned something about the roof. And originally, it was supposed to be a $5.8 million 50-50 split, okay? But then we were told that it wasn't going to be bonded, only 1.5 was going to be bonded, close to that, for both schools. And originally, we were going to replace, we were going to have to do more work on it because we were going to put solar on it, but now it wasn't going to be. And then we were going to replace the membrane and the insulation on the roofs. Well, I'm going to tell you something, people here. I'm on the other side of the fence again, and even which side of the fence I was always on, I was always out there for protecting the taxpayers of the city. And I'm tired of all this, my taxes going up. And I always worked and looked at the budget, and I remember you, Alderman Dowd, coming to the Board of Education meeting and saying to us right after with the McCarthy, when we needed to sign, we've got to vote on it right now. Right now we have to do it. And I said, every time you came in, well, don't we have a chance to talk about it? No, it has to be done right now. Well, no, it doesn't have to be done right now. And an investigation, it should have members of the public on this committee. Because we the people should have the right to see how our money is being spent. So with that, I don't understand is that now we're splitting this. Now, if you were going to renovate your house and a person who works for the district said to me, maybe we do things wrong. I think we do things wrong. And I'll take some responsibility for this. Maybe I did not ask that right question. We don't bring the architect in to do what we need to do. And we talked about Mount Pleasant, $27 million. Well, we don't know what $27 million was going to buy us because we didn't do a complete assessment of it. So if you're going to put an addition on your house or you're going to do something with your roof, aren't you going to have somebody come up and inspect that roof? Absolutely, because you're just not going to throw money out the window. You're not, because it's your money. But when it belongs to us, it doesn't matter. I'm tired of working and having to give all my money to the city. I'm tired of my taxes going up. And all our seniors have had it here, and the veterans, because our money keeps getting spent with no questions asked. So if a roof has to be replaced, or you're going to think about doing anything with a roof, you get a roofer. And you have the roofer go up and check the roof. And then the roofer's going to tell you what needs to be done. But when I'm listening to it, going to patch it? You're going to patch it? You put a patch
30
in it,
seconds.
and then the dike opens up, and then you have more problems. Why aren't we being proactive rather reactive? This should have been handled better. And I'll take some responsibility because obviously I forgot a question here or there. Thank you.
Anyone else, public comment? All right. Communications,
None?
unfinished business. R-24-005 is returned to us from the full board. There were questions that people had relative to the Board of Education and the school department. So now is the opportunity, if you have questions for them, to ask the questions. We have representatives here this evening to answer them. Oh, yes, Alderman Debo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First thing, I'd like a couple of things. I want to say one thing, and then I want to ask Chairman Dowd a question. So I want to say that we do have citizens of Nashville on this board. We're taxpayers too. Some of us are all different salaries. We're not, I'm not rich, that's for sure. So I understand when we hit the tax bill, it affects me just as much as anybody else, and I'm cognizant of that. One thing that was said in public comment is the renovations were done in the summer. Is that true? Everything's done?
This project goes through the summer of 2025.
And that's what I was trying to clarify.
Nowhere near completed.
Okay. And the last question I have to you before we, everybody really takes it apart is the May-June timeframe that the citizen had just mentioned, that they found out about it. Is that when we found out that we were gonna have a shortfall last May or last June?
I'm gonna let the board, the school department answer that. We did not get a definitive answer till the end of the last year and we never got an answer in writing. So, when we got to the point where this issue appeared, now we had to start looking at replacing that money with bond money. Right at the moment, we have a contract with 2 contractors that we're obligated to pay for the project, so.
And did that come through the joint special, or did we know about, I didn't know about it until it came up at
No,
the
the
budget
school
meeting.
school projects are, the Board of Education gives them to the joint special, which is a committee of half aldermen, half Board of Ed members. And then what's determined to be required for bond money comes to the Board of Aldermen in a bond request. Once it gets approved, that money goes to the joint special to manage in the project.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Alderwoman Kelly?
Just a point of order, I believe we have to put it in front of us to speak about it.
That was a good question, but there's nobody here from legal. It was referred back to this committee,
Not tabled.
so
But we didn't even
I don't
have to
think
make
it
a
was-
motion, so we
Just have to
shouldn't
take a
be
motion
talking,
to
we have
talk
to make some
if
motion to
we
talk
want to
about
do
it.
that, we can. Alderman O'Brien? Want to read that as, and,
You read the ordinance?
yeah, read this and request the final passage.
Before us this evening is R-24-005, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $8,500,000 to fund additional costs for the building renovations at the Birch Hill and Main Dunstable Road Elementary School. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion for final passage.
Motion's on the floor for final passage. Now, are there any other questions that, people had questions for the school department? Alderman Sullivan?
I have several based on the communication and the information that we got over the past few days versus what was budgeted versus what was paid, appeal process, are there monies left over in ESSER funds that we can track? And then essentially what was asked before is, when did we know that there was a shortfall? I can say that in looking at the financial forms that are online that everybody can look at, the first indication was made in December of '23. That's where the shortfall first showed up in public. So as far as when we knew about it, the public knew about it in December. When did the people watching, keeping track of the money know about it? So somehow there's a chain in there, and I think that's one question that needs to be answered. I think the other question that needs to be answered is there any money left? Is there any way that we can capture that, appeal to the state? I mean, these are all, I have a lot of questions around this that I'm hoping we can dig into tonight and find a way forward.
So, someone from the school department wish to answer?
Good evening, Dan Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. Sort of one of your questions, Alderman Sullivan. We've budgeted 29 million of the 29.2 has been allocated to the ESSER 3 grant. There's 160,000 or so that's not allocated yet. So that's all that's available to spend between now and September. The document that I sent out has the detail of what everything was used for, and the week before I sent out a summary, which sort of took this document and tried to break it down into what we were spending it on. Was it staffing? Was it contracted services? Was it construction, et cetera? So there were, I think as I said a couple of weeks ago, there were more requests than there was for enough money. And let me give you a little bit of background. When we received this ESSER 3 grant, it was $29 million. I'm the one that suggested we use some of that for construction, because that was a lot of money received. We had to spend it in a very short period of time. There's only so many extra teachers or programs or things that you can spend it on when you realize that it's not continuous funds. So if you're gonna hire a bunch of staff, you can't keep those staff year to year because the funding's a temporary funding. So I'm the one that suggested let's use some of it for construction. So that's what sort of got the whole ball started to use some of it construction. To this day, I think that was a good idea. We could have a whole bunch of books that no one's ever going to use. We could have programs that are going to run out at the end of this school year. I think all in all, it made sense to do that. And as I had mentioned before, the Franklin Street HVAC project ended up in the ESSER 3 grant. That's what made it $18 million. That was the big thing that affected how much we could put in for the other two, for the Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable. We couldn't spend all of that money in the ESSER 3 grant on construction. That's not allowed. And there were many other costs, items that were in ESSER 2. For example, Project Succeed is a program we're doing with the Boys and Girls Club. It was in ESSER 2. It was decided to continue that program. Therefore, that got moved into ESSER 3. So there were multiple things going on at the same time. That's kind of, so we got to the point where we had more requests than we had money. So that was sort of the genesis of the situation.
Follow-up question, Alderman Sullivan?
Thanks. So I don't know how, so I'm gonna keep going back to the original resolution that we passed in October of '22. When we talked about the Maine Dunstable and Birch Hill initially. And there was 17 million that was supposed to come from ESSER funds.
16, I believe.
Okay, 16. At what point did we not know that we didn't have the 16 million? So somebody crafted that resolution. Somebody came up with the number of $16 million. That's a very crooked number. Not crooked in a mean way. Just wanna get that on the record.
I understand.
Just, 16 million, I mean, that comes out to half. So at what point did someone say, we don't have 16 million, we're spending this on this and this on, so that is really, I think what really I want to know where, we all voted on that, we all said, this is a great opportunity for us to update two elementary schools, and half of the money is gonna be free money, from the feds.
ESSER, yes.
So,
when we first decided to use some of the ESSER funds for construction, the tricky part became typically the federal grant funding we receive, we can't do construction with. So ESSER told us that we had to finish all the construction by September of '24. That was originally what we were told. So, and we had to fill out a lot of paperwork. Mr. Smith did a lot of that work. There were probably 7 or 8 or 9 different documents that had to be required. So when I go back and look at the timing of things, we put that resolution forward, I think, in November of '22. At that point in time, we had yet to receive the full approval from the grant management system from the state to spend all those funds. But knowing that we had to get moving on this if we were going to spend all the funds in time, I think we put the cart before the horse with the resolution. When I go back and look at this, I think that's probably what happened. So by the time the spring came, when I looked into the detail of ESSER 3 and realized there's not enough money in here. The two amounts that were placed in, the 6 and 6.5 million, I believe were placed into the grant in April of '23. So it was probably a month or so later when this sort of came to light.
So the summer,
Yeah, late spring, early summer.
so what happened? What happened in between, well, I'll just pick August and December.
Well, I knew about it. My boss, superintendent, knew about it. Sean Smith knew about it. I believe Alderman Dowd knew about it. So this was, at this point in time, a project that was in JSSBC. So the JSSBC chairman knew about it. Sean Smith, who attends that on behalf of the school district, knew about it. And the request showed up later in the year.
Okay. There we have it.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. So I want to thank you for sending out that information. I wish it would have been on a spreadsheet instead of 44 pages. Luckily, most of my colleagues here have put it on a spreadsheet, and it caused us to actually look into it instead of just looking at 44 pages like this. So thank you for that. The other thing, it concerns me that we're using money like this on staffing. A couple reasons, right? So the money's going to run out. So what happens when the money runs out? Staff goes where? Bye-bye, right? And that's what's happening. That's what's happening now, right? So, things have come to us before where they're like, well, if we use this money on hiring people, we won't be able to, we don't guarantee it next year, so we don't use it on people. So I'm concerned about that. I think that was a huge mistake. Knowing in summer of last year and not having any knowledge anywhere here other than maybe Alderman Dowd, I get it, right? The Board of Education and education here in Nashua is its own entity. But at the end of the day, the money comes through us. So when we're all here thinking that the schools are gonna be done, and it's gonna be done with that money coming from the Fed and the money that we already allocated. And then, 6, 7 months later, we're finding out, well, that isn't true. We knew about it, but, it wasn't true. Well, how do we explain that to taxpayers? Because I'm the one walking around my ward trying to explain that. I don't see the people that administer the schools going around telling them that. And I certainly don't think it's coming from the teachers because, some of them are probably going to get cut, and that's not going to look good either. So, it's concerning when we have to go back and explain to the taxpayers where some money went, because this spreadsheet does not easily tell a person living in my ward somewhere, hey, by the way, this is where the money went. It went to this program, or it went to teachers we're now going to lay off. How am I going to tell them that, right? So it's concerning that we don't have an easy way to show this to other people, because not everyone is an accountant, or not everyone is a treasurer, right? So it's hard to do that. You even said yourself a couple weeks back, well, it's complex. So if it's complex to us and you, it's certainly going to be complex to people that don't know anything about this type of stuff. So the whole thing's, I don't want to say disturbing, that sounds a little harsh, but, I am concerned because now it's turning into a big thing. And no matter what the outcome is here, whether we approve this or we don't approve this, it's going to be out there, and it's going to be, something got messed up, and then there's an error somewhere, and that's what it's going to look like no matter what we decide tonight. So those are my thoughts on it. Maybe there's a question in there, I don't know.
Well,
Maybe there's something you
just
guys can
to
explain.
the staffing point. These funds were put aside to help the district get through the COVID time period, okay? Management at the district at the time felt that adding staff, the principals at the schools said, this is good. We can use a person so we can have smaller classes, or we can use someone that'll help transition the kid. We can use more counselors. So a lot of this staff, this money was put aside by the federal government for a short period of time to be used for those sorts of things. So yeah, I've been very, very clear with everyone at the school district and the Board of Education that these are temporary staff. So the whole idea that, you know, and find a union that would say, oh, I've got 12 new people, and tomorrow, 2 years, they're gonna be gone, but I'm not gonna complain about it. It's part of the game. This was very, very clear on this. This is no surprise that anybody's in the grant. Now, there may be decisions made by the Board of Education that some of the people that were charged to this grant, they'd rather keep them instead of somebody else. That's part of managing a school district. We're reducing the number. There's fewer students going to our district than there were 5 years ago, significantly, and there's more adults than there were 5 years ago. So you have to change how you do things sometimes. That's hard to do in a school district. People don't like change, so.
Follow up?
Follow up, Alderman Tebow?
How much money did you guys give back to the city last year in the budget, at the end of the budget?
Well, there was about 1.8 million of salaries, but there was a big number in benefits, but that benefit number, the way that number's produced, that's produced by Rose Evans and City Hall here and applied to our budget. I think there was about 2.5 million returned in benefits, but it's not something we budget.
Oh, that you said 1.8 in cash, or not cash, but you know what I mean?
Like in
Not
wages, yes, 1.8.
So we couldn't have
1.9.
taken that and used it for anything else? You had to give it back to the city instead of putting it into the things that you ended up needing, I guess?
I mean, it wasn't done.
Yeah. Okay, I'm good.
Alderman
now.
Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, no one is blaming you or.
No, no,
and
no,
I- and I'm
look,
try-
that
and
was
I'm-
part of the
I'm actually
process.
trying not to blame anybody, but I actually would like to speak to the additional scope items, if I may, Mr. Chairman, which probably wouldn't necessarily be you, Dan. The spreadsheet this document that I have here, the level one must-haves, it says $2,187,503.81. When I calculated it based on the individual items that are on the next page, I come up with $2,109,405.80. It's the same thing with all the other ones. I don't come up with the same number. I come up with, if you add the deferred items into a little over 3.3 million, and they've got almost 3.5 million. So I would just like someone
So
to,
that was put together by Mr. Morel, and he can
Okay.
explain it.
I'll explain it.
okay, so there is a difference between this page
Yes.
and this page.
Yes,
Thank
there
you.
is. Yep. Brendan Orell, Harvey Construction, project manager for the Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable projects. So page one is a summary of the breakout by level, as well as the overall total. Page two, if you look up in the top right-hand corner, see how it says note? So at the Joint Special School Building Committee, when we bring an additional scope item forward with a PCO, at the bottom of that PCO, there are our standard markups. The way that we explain that is if we are taking on additional work, it is going to cost us additional money. So our payment and performance bond, which ensures that we can complete that work, increases by a percentage. Same with our general liability insurance. We do get a small fee associated with that that is agreed upon at the GMP time. And then there's also one other item, and that is our software licensing for all of our programs. So as I noted within that, excuse me, the 5 prices under level 1 must-have, if you take those 5, you add them up, I believe it's about $80,000 below the overall total listed on page number 1. The reason behind that is that those markups are not included in these individual numbers.
Follow up?
I did watch the joint special school meeting, and I, please correct me if I'm wrong, you had made some kind of comment that if we do it now within this project, you're some of your staff are already there, so there's no additional cost. So that has not been put into this,
So
correct?
that is correct. So like typically when we would present a guaranteed maximum price for a project, and I was explaining this to you, and I wanted to follow up with you, Alderman Sullivan. So Alderman Sullivan had asked a very good question at the time as to, so let's say the roof replacements. If that were to be looked at as a standalone project, that the city was going to go out and hire any contractor, whether it be Harvey Construction or anybody else, that contractor would have costs that are typically identified in what's called a general conditions. And then in the back half of that, in our GMPs that we present, you'll also see our insurances and fees. It's essentially what it takes us to build the job. So I have to pay my site superintendent to supervise the work. I have to pay a laborer to help him clean up, to move around the job site. I need dumpsters so I can clean up the job site. All of that stuff would be looked at as essentially a standalone budget. So if I were to look at the roof replacements as a standalone project with no resources mobilized, all of those costs would have to be included in that overall number. Because I'm already being paid under the current contract that is approved, that we are currently executing. My superintendent is being paid, my assistant superintendent, laborers, so on and so forth. What we are saying is the price that we are representing here only includes those small markups that you will see on our standard PCO. We are not adding any supervision, any labor, any project management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The only contingent portion to that is at the JSSBC, I had noted that, for instance, with the roof replacements, if we go past the month of April, the ability for me to complete that work by September of 2025, when my general liability policy runs out for this project, that would become extremely difficult. So if these items were not approved prior to that, I would have difficulty getting them done under the current timeline. Does that?
Thank you.
Follow-up?
No, not with him. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
No, not a problem. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I actually don't even know who to ask this question to. I did go over the grants and the spreadsheets and so on, and I did appreciate having all the breakdown and so on to all this. There's a lot of duplicate things that were, but I just have a question about this particular document. Would I ask Mr. Donovan? Yes. It's just gonna be really, really quick as far, when it says ARP ACT, I assume it's ARPA CT?
Yes.
And what does the CT stand for?
Don't know.
You don't know, okay.
Don't know all
But
the
it's all
initials.
part of the ARPA, the ESSER
Yes.
funds are falling within the ARPA. Okay, then, and my next question would be, if I may,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
follow.
is just, we talked about ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. Do you know what the breakdown of what the monies were from ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3? And how many, because you also talked about that one project that went from ESSER 2 and you brought into ESSER 3, because they decided they wanted to continue it. Could you just?
Yeah, ESSER 1 was about $3 million.
Okay.
And that closed a couple years ago. ESSER 2 was 12.8 or so. And then ESSER 3 was 29 million.
Okay, and other than that one project, were there any other projects that went from 1 into 2 or 2 into 3? Well, we know the one that went to 3.
No, well, I mean, were there activities, that's what they call them
No.
in the grant, activities in one grant that moved to another? Yes, there were multiple grants, activities in 2 that moved to 3. Construction-wise, no, the only construction costs were in 3. There were no construction costs in the other 2 grants.
And may I also ask, I also remember, and I don't know if it was at the joint special, I think it was when y'all were here before, you made some kind of comment about the ESSER 3. There were certain criteria that said a certain percentage of it had to be used, could
Right.
not be used for construction, it had to be used specifically for a certain. type of
Learning
asset.
loss and things like that,
Right.
correct.
So what was that percentage? So of the 29 million?
It was, it
Sure.
was 30%. So 30% was about 8.7, 8.8 million.
And the rest of the ESSER funds were used between the, for construction-wise? Is it?
Not all of them, no, they were used for other things.
Okay. Okay.
But the piece of the 29 million, it was 18.585. That was the construction piece of the 29 million for the
Okay.
total grant.
And just one point of clarification, if I can ask. You talked about having to take $6 million into the, for Franklin for the HVAC system. Is that, do I have that understanding correctly?
That, all I can tell you about that ended up in ESSER 3. Okay,
yeah, I did see that.
when I go back and look, I found a document when we requested the work, the construction work for Franklin. We sent a document to the state that had some of it in ESSER 2 and some of it in ESSER 3. It ended up all in ESSER 3. So I don't have any other document that can prove, you know, what happened there, but the plan was to split it, and it all ended up in ESSER 3.
Okay, now I do understand that a little bit better. So when I'm looking at this, it says that 6.1 was requested and 6 million was given. Is that how I read this properly when I see ARPACT and then ARPACT amount paid? Or is that just amount paid so far onto the 6.1?
Yeah, that, which,
Okay, so when I'm looking at this document here, and I see that it says, after the object code, it says ARPACT, and there's a dollar amount underneath that of $6.1 million. Then the next column says RPACT, amount paid, and it says a little over $6 million. So I guess it's right on page 3, I guess you would say. It's on
Yes.
every column, so
Yeah.
the amount paid is it finalized? In other words, we're not going to take any more money from this, or are we still working to get that, the rest
the
of it?
amount paid is the amount we've billed for so far
Okay.
and received back.
But that's so far, so there
That's so
could be
far.
still more towards that 6.1 million.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
the reason that I had asked was,
We'll bill that full 6.1
Okay.
million and collect all that.
okay, the reason why I had asked, Mr. Chairman, was because I did do a spreadsheet on this, and it seemed like there was a whole lot of money left, but we're still billing the first column. The second column is only what we billed up to so far, but there's still bills pending?
Yes,
Okay,
definitely.
thank you, I'm done.
Yeah, if you, just to try to
Right.
answer that, on the very first page, it says project, 29,164,000. That's the total amount of the grant,
Okay,
okay? Budgeted is 29,017,000. That's the total amount that has been approved thus far in all the activities that make up this sheet. And then the amount they have paid us as of when I ran this report was 20 million. But we should be collecting the rest of that between now and October, let's say.
I do have one more follow-up then, just so for clarification for me,
Follow-up,
if I
go
may.
ahead.
Thank you. So under the project where it says $29,164,886.47, that's the total grant. The budgeted, is that just what we billed them so far, or are we gonna use up the whole 29.1 million, I guess I should be asking?
Yes, we will.
Okay, so the total grant money and so on, there's nothing left on the table that we could try to grab to reduce this 8.5 million?
There's
correct?
just there's about $150,000.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your
Alderman
time.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donovan, if you could still remain in the hot seat, catch fire, we'll extinguish it. Mr. Donovan, I come from a different background on the fire department, where every captain manages that particular station. So he appropriates what, he needs. If he needs more paving or something like that, puts it in, and it goes to the chief's office, and it's determined if that particular, they turn into capital projects, if approved, and then it gets done. Do you have something like that in the school department? Because it leads me to think that perhaps maybe not. Because it seems like you said you had a lot of requests on these ESSER funds. And one, okay, I can handle falling down the rabbit hole once, but I'd like to have something preventative where it would not happen again. In other words, some whistle should have went off and said, like, we need to repair these roofs, they're A1 priority. Maybe we can't hire those specialists, you know? So do you have something like within your, the school department that would identify capital projects and make sure that those funds remain attached to those particular projects?
Yes, typically, a capital project is one activity, it's one project. This grant, one-time grant, many millions of dollars, to be honest, it kind of overwhelmed us. This was a lot of money given to us. I had hardly any staff. I had lost my main person for most of last year. He left in November of '22. Just filled that position in October. Another person left. So we were short-staffed, and I'm not blaming that for the reason, but there was a lot going on during a time, and I would, you know, what did I learn from this? I learned that if we ever get another big $20 million grant, we assign a person to work that grant, and that's gonna be the main part of their job. If I had to do it over again, lesson learned, assign a person or hire a person, even for, you know, a 2 or 3 year period, say, this is your job to track and control this grant. We treated this grant like we do all the other grants. And we have, you know, 13, 14 million of grants on an annual basis. We do a pretty good job on those. But this was a bit overwhelming for us.
Yes.
Superintendent. Just to add to Mr. Donovan's testimony, I agree where.
Can you just give your name and address?
Mario Andrade, Superintendent of Schools. So I just want to agree and really echo Mr. Donovan's words about just the vastness of this grant. So ESSA 1, 2, and 3, obviously there was a lot of money coming through. And to your point, Mr. O'Brien, in a good year or a couple years around capital improvement, Mr. Smith has a 50-year plan right now. This money came in fast and furious, and there was deadlines associated with it. So when we talked back in 2017-18, we weren't talking about renovations to Birch Hill and Main Dunstable at the scope of work. And so when we had the opportunity to actually increase this, I think the urgency on how fast we can turn around this project and having ESSA money just expedited the process. And so there wasn't as many checks and balances. As Mr. Donovan said, we started having the JSSB approvals in October, November of what the grant was. And as Mr. Donovan said, the grant wasn't really approved until actually April. So we were already making plans and signing contracts before the grant was even approved. So in hindsight, if we had to do this all over again, I think, you know, there would have been a lot more checks and balances saying we shouldn't be assigning us any kind of projects until we have the full scope, until the Department of Education approved the activity. And I think some of the concern at that time is if we waited until April, until those activities were approved, could we be working with Javi and get the projects done by the September of '25? And I hate to say it's almost like the used car salesman. If you don't buy right now, then you're gonna lose your opportunity. And then we had this funds, then again, it could have been a different question. If we weren't able to use ESSA funds in that short time period, were we gonna do that project at all? Were we gonna go out to the city to say, instead of bonding $30 million, we're gonna bond $42 million. And it's all gonna be on the taxpayers at that point. So I think there was a little of urgency around how do we use the ESSA money. But to your point, I think process-wise, there wasn't enough checks and balances along the way. And as Mr. Donovan said, the construction is long-term. You know, we talked about staffing. That was only for 1 or 2 years, and they knew that when they walked into those positions. But those positions are gonna go away, or we're gonna have to absorb somewhere into the operating budget. So this is a long-term solution. Process could be revised. So hopefully we get another $60 million win fill on a different reason, something more positive than a pandemic. And then we can put more checks and balances into place. But I think, as Mr. Donovan said, the process got ahead of itself before activities got approved, and then once we were notified, we had internal conversations.
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Superintendent, my follow-up is more just as a comment.
Yep.
I like what Mr. Donovan and what you are saying, because I think that would have gone a long way in this type of situation. Sounds like it was a big grant. It got away from you a little bit. And I think if you change your procedures going on in the future, perhaps maybe we can eliminate this type of shortfall again. So if you could do diligence and look into that, that would, I think, go a long way in pleasing this board and the taxpayers too.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Superintendent.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll respond to Superintendent Andrade real quick, and then I got a question for Harvey. I would just say that the people that came in for those staffing jobs knew they were only gonna be temporary.
Yes.
But if you're keeping those people and letting other people go, like Mr. Donovan had kind of intimated, well then, those people didn't know about it. So, that's, you gotta be fair there when you say that. And I will say, thank you, because this sounds as close to accountability as I've heard so far about this whole thing. And for Harvey, so my question, I had asked this in our meeting 2 weeks ago or whatever. And the first question for Harvey is, how many schools have you done for us so far?
I've been with Harvey for 3 years.
Okay.
So-
Maybe Sean knows?
I'd say 10 to
Okay, so 10 to 15 schools?
15. Yeah.
So my question is, how many of those schools had 2 roofs on it when you went to renovate?
The only schools that I've worked on in my time have been Fairgrounds, Pennachuck, the McCarthy School. So I could
Obviously, the
not,
McCarthy would
I
be
could
out.
not speak to others.
Can Mr. Smith speak to those? I'm just curious. I assume we've done schools before and roofs before.
Yep.
And probably come forward and found out they had 2 roofs. So my question was, why wouldn't we think that they might have 2 roofs now? Like, why would we guess and say, oh, we just gotta take off the roof, put one roof on, we're good. Actually, you wouldn't even have to take it off. Just put another roof, slap that on, and we're good. Why would we think that there was no possibility on these 2 schools that there might be two
So
layers on there?
The roof to get to where we are now is essentially a 3-step process. It's pretty easy to walk you through it. So step number 1 was with the architects and engineers, Harriman Architects, who designed these 2 projects. So their original recommendation was, as somebody else in the committee had noted earlier, originally we were looking at solar on these roofs. Not only the solar, but the second that you go to replace a roof on a new building, or the McCarthy School, Pennachuck, Fairgrounds put a new roof on a new building, nowadays, your energy codes are very stringent. You want to make your building as tight and as thermally sound as possible. So the insulation that you're putting on that roof is now sometimes 2 to 3 times as thick as what used to be put on the roof. That is the situation that we found ourselves in here originally. So the original design assessment from the architects and engineers was replace the roof in its entirety, which is what we are proposing now. However, it was replace the roof in its entirety and comply with current energy codes. So the current insulation on the building is somewhere in between R16 and R18. That's your value of rating of thermal insulation. What the current energy code dictates is you need to upgrade that to an R30, double the thickness, double the weight, and with less heat going through that roof, your snow is gonna not melt and build up and build up and build up. So now you're putting 3 times the amount of snow and insulation on a roof. The building can't support it. So the original assessment that Harvey Construction provided pricing, logistics, and scheduling on was, you need to do all the structural reinforcement that Harriman advised us to do. That was approximately $600,000 per school alone. The roof replacement itself was approximately $1.2 million per school. So you're at 1.8. It also extended our schedule out an additional 14 months, putting us in that school all the way until 2026. So at that point, it was identified, we cannot do this scope. The project does not have the money to support that, and we cannot disrupt the school for that long of a period of time. So now it came back to the drawing board of what can we do? At Pennachuck, there was a recent thing we did. There's the old building, there's a flat roof in the center. What we were able to do there to reduce costs on that portion of the project was you cut into the rubber on the roof, make sure the insulation below is dry, still good quality, no voids below it. As long as it's good, you can put a new membrane over it. If it's not good, you replace that insulation. You now put the whole new membrane on it. You've got another 20-year warranty certified from the roofing manufacturer. That's what we did at Pennachuck. So we said, could we do that here? And there are 3 pieces of documentation. One is a roof assessment that was done back in 2012 and provided in documentation from Mr. Smith and his team, which indicated that the roof that was there was a standard rubber membrane roof. The documents that were also kept by Mr. Smith's team back to the 2 additions that were put on in 1994, somewhere in that time period, that indicated that the roof was ripped down, fully replaced. And then we performed a visual, non-destructive survey. All 3 pieces of documentation showed us that you have a rubber roof. So the recommendation from the architects and engineers, which we priced and advised upon, said, let's do what we did at Pennachuck and replace it. The cost to do that, which is shown going back to April 6, 2023, that JSSBC is when the GMP was approved for these 2 projects. If you look at the first page, alternate number 3 is the roof membrane replacement. It was $575 for one school, $565 for the other. So now the price that is being provided, which is listed here at 1.9, what that includes is not only the full roof replacement from Harvey Construction, but there is also another contractor, EEI, that's working with us. So that includes their costs to replace the damaged roof drain bowls, to replace some exhaust fans that have been completely degraded and are non-functional, and also will have to get ripped off as we're performing our replacements. It also includes 2 new roof hatches, 5 new skylights, going back to the point of thermal insulation. All the skylights are cracked, thermally degraded, so on and so forth. So that's really the background story, 100% on the design process that we underwent with Harriman, Mr. Smith's team, the JSSBC as well, what was presented at the various stages of pricing, and how we got to where we were. What has been stated previously is once we hired a roofer, Alderman Dowd, Mr. Smith, and myself all said, we need to confirm what's up there. We need to figure out if we can do the roofs during this project. Let's get our roofer out there. Let's cut it open, and let's figure out what's up there. And we also brought an asbestos abatement individual in to assess the roofs. So that price includes the asbestos abatement, the full demolition, a full new roof, and all those other items.
When was that done?
That was done, so every single price that makes up this entire
No, I meant,
list.
when was it that you found out that you had that second roof?
So it was October. It was October of 2023.
I appreciate that. That's a
And
good
every
explanation.
price on this sheet was collected between August and October, essentially.
Okay. No,
Every
that's good.
single
I appreciate that. That's a good explanation of the whole roofing thing, and I think that the only issue I would have is that I wish we would have got hold of that information. Maybe the GSSBC did, but, no? So I guess it didn't, but thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. I wanted to just say that a lot of my questions got answered because I was asking about just what are we gonna do in the future to make sure that we're checking and balancing things, because obviously this was a frustrating thing for everybody and we wanna finish the work.
Yep.
So thank you for all the conversations around accountability. My questions, I appreciated the scope items and how we broke them down into must-haves, should-haves, good-haves, et cetera. I hate putting anything that we need to put in our schools into those categories. So my question, not because I'm advocating for it, but my question is, if we only did the must-haves, what happens to the other 3 levels? And that might be for Sean. do they ever get done? What does the cost look like if we're deferring it? And that could be a Harvey question.
So, from my perspective, I would say that, like, for instance, if we look at the should-have items, so new basketball hoops, the gymnasium ceiling acoustic treatment, refinish the gym floor, that type of stuff. Really, you know, what was expressed at the JSSBC, which you were not in attendance, since you're not on that committee, but what was expressed there is really, not only is there inflation associated with those items, so the costs inevitably just increase from the materials getting more expensive and inflation increasing, but you also have what I explained earlier, that if we were to look at these items, for instance, the new sidewalks and everything there is a standalone price. So a few months ago, there was a GMP approved for the Pennachuck dehumidification project. And that is a very short project. We're going back there to finish that, and it's only a couple months. And within that, I had all of the general conditions and everything it took me to basically perform that work. And that was a few $100,000. And that would be added to this value to give you a very, very narrow, fine breakdown of sort of the cost increase that would be associated with that. You would be looking at it as an entirely different project, hiring Harvey, getting us mobilized, getting all of our resources mobilized, and then trying to perform the work that's identified there. So as to how Mr. Smith and his team could navigate those items down the road, I would have to defer to him on that.
All set?
I wanted to hear Mr. Smith's answer.
Oh.
Good evening, Sean Smith, Plant Operations Director. So the things that, you said, what if we just did the must-haves? What would happen to everything else? It would most likely, a lot of it would go into our deferred maintenance pot, which currently is around 14 million. On average, for most years, you get $100,000. So you can do the math, it's a lot of, many years, it just doesn't get done. The last couple of years, I've been fortunate. I've got a little bit of escrow funds from the end of the year, and then the aldermen have given me some additional money. So I've had like $500,000-600,000 the last 2 years. So that's a short answer. It would just go into that queuing pattern until such time as it's funded. I would say I was part of the process of coming up with these 4 levels. To me, as a facility director, this is a one-shot deal. You get to school, you identify it, we want to renovate it. That's the one time you get to touch that school. There have been times that we've renovated a school. I don't even myself go back for 6 months to a year because I don't have to worry about that one anymore. I guess I would urge that you approve all these items, even the deferred items. Deferring is radon mitigation. We're only deferring it because we don't have to make the decision right now. But if they retest it when all the construction is done and we still find that we have radon, we have to do that. So I guess I would suggest to you that the best approach is to approve the $8.5 million and trust that those on a joint special with our assistance will make the right decisions. We're not going to spend more money than we have to. In fact, we've already identified some things in the last couple of weeks that we do not have to do.
Thank you.
Let's see, Kelly, and then Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if this would be for Mr. Donovan or Superintendent Andre. My question is there, and I think it was brought up by Alderman Sullivan at the, or kind of somewhat brought up at the Joint Special School Building, is there any chance that we can go forward and ask the state, you know, whether we Maya COPA, however we want to handle this, for additional funds, perhaps some, you know, that aren't going to be able to spend all their ESSERs? I know it's unlikely, but is there a chance we could at least go and ask?
Asking never hurts, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I can have another conversation, but I did have a conversation with the commissioner to go over how much we were approved, what was in our activities, and essentially the short answer was, that's the money that you have. But I always can approach the state to see if there's any other districts that haven't allocated all their money, and see if we go from there. But As I said, my conversation with the commissioner was, you were allotted the $29 million. This is how much you wrote in activities. You have $100,000 left.
I understand. May I-
Follow up?
Thank you. Then I guess my ask is going to be, could we put a formal request in asking for additional monies, and then if push comes to shove at the end, we've already spent this money, and then get it back to pay down the bond or something like that? I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we can do looking forward to that. So if we put a formal request in saying, basically, if you guys got any extra money, push it our way.
I mean, I'm more than happy to pen a letter to him, but
I would appreciate that, honestly. I'm sure it's not gonna go anywhere, but as you pointed out, it never hurts to ask and be in the front of the line. Thank you.
All set?
Yes.
Yes, Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to, I guess we're at the point where we're sort of post-morteming this whole what happened, what could be better for the future, but one thing that still stuck out to me, somebody had mentioned earlier, you know, we're not all accountants. I do like excitement in my life, so I did pick accounting as a career path. And one thing that stuck out to me when this all came to be and questions started asking and requests started flying was I went chasing down information, and we're always hearing about the availability of information. And what was concerning to me is when I got on the National School District's website and I was able to find the status reports for the ESSER funds. The ESSER 2 status report only gave us a balance through September of 2023. And the ESSER 3 status report also gave us our current balance through September of 2023. And they had last been updated, it looks like, in February of 2023. And that's concerning to me because this all arose in February of 2024, and we're in March almost of 2023. And I guess my question, comment, whatever it may be, is what can we do on this end to ensure that this very fluid, very living document is updated in a timely fashion? I would understand if I got on there and found something through December. To me, that would feel like a reasonable point to have information current through. But when I'm looking at things that are only current through a year ago, that's a concern of mine. And I just, you know, hope for the sake of us, you know, trying to dig into these issues, and for the sake of the public who are taking an interest in this, that is an additional item that we could do better going forward, because these aren't going to be the last grants that we receive from levels of government higher than us. And we need to be prepared for that going forward. And that's all I've got.
Okay. Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I want to speak to something first, and then I'd like to move this forward. And in listening to comments, and I guess we'll call it testimony, for lack of a better term, that the timeline of when we knew about it and everything that occurred beyond that, you know, if we knew maybe in spring or summer of last year, we went through a budget season at that point. We went through budgets that had surpluses for the school system, blew through that. Unassigned fund balance dollars that came out of previous fiscal years, escrow monies that were put in other places could have been applied to this if the people that knew raised their hand and said, you know, this project that we now have people working on, there's going to be a shortfall of $4.5 million. We're blowing through all these different opportunities to move some money over, and we could have done it. We didn't. I'm going to make a motion to amend this. I'm going to make a motion to amend this to $4.5 million as opposed to $8.5 million. Why? I just heard over the last 5 minutes, the next time we do it, we need to have checks and balances, we need to have systems and processes in place in order to watch our spending. And from what I heard, we had the money, and I think Franklin Street, while a great project, that getting moved from one ESSER round into the second one, that's where our money is. So I'm not debating that. I'm not debating any of these projects. I'm gonna say, all of them are great. I think it's fine. But I wanna make a motion to amend this to only bond $4.5 million to replace the ESSER fund money that went to something else. These are funds that are already paying for construction that's going on today that we need to make sure that we have. That other money, we are now held accountable, and where can we get it? Well, we have a budget season coming up. We're gonna have surpluses that we have on the record, that we're gonna have surpluses from the McCarthy Middle School that can go into or towards this. I don't know what the money, I mean, we talked about $2 million on Thursday night. I understand that we're only about 84% of the way through the project, but I come from a world of forecasting, and if I went to somebody and said I have 84% chance that this number is gonna be right, that's pretty good, understanding there's some things to go around or things to happen. But I think it right now today holds us accountable as opposed to spending or approving the $8.5 million and hope that we don't need it. This, by reducing it by $4 million and only bonding $4.5 million, allows us to patch what we missed and hold us accountable as a city, a budget committee, a JSSBC, to make sure that these priorities that we agree are important get paid for through other sources. That is my motion that I'd like this committee to consider.
Okay, one thing before that. So there are other expenses on this list, like the BDA that we're required to do. The fire department mandates it. That's not in the $4.5 million. And as far as money's coming from McCarthy to pay for Birch Hill, Maine, Dunstable, Mr. Griffin, would you explain how the bond situation works, where it's not that simple? You have to take steps?
Certainly, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. I think the intent, I watched the joint special the other night, I think folks are looking forward to at least $2 million, McCarthy Middle School. How that would work mechanically is, the good news is we haven't sold that $10 million bond yet, so there's no funds to repurpose. So the way it would go mechanically is when you are done with the McCarthy and the other two middle schools, you rescind a portion of the bond. So let's say that bond is $10 million. You've authorized that. That's why you're able to spend. What I would recommend, and I'm not sure how you guys could all come to agreement, but I would rescind a portion of that bond, let's say from 10 to 8. Your other point is you're only putting 4.5 of the 8.5 request, so you're looking for other funds. You're waiting for the budget maybe, figuring out. We do have healthy on purpose. We have healthy assigned fund balance. We talked about that a few weeks ago. We've already earmarked about half of the $20 million for needed things. So the first one is SURF. To fund SURF in fiscal '25, I'm recommending, along with the mayor, $5 million. We talked about benefits. Mr. Cummings came in several months ago and explained that costs aren't going down in that area. So we feel comfortable putting $4 million of the assigned fund balance into that particular benefits fund. There's a few others that are going to have public hearings on March 25th. So there's going to be about $10 million left in assigned fund balance. And the question is, should we use some of that for this project? Our rating agencies, we hate to over-dramatize, but they like to see a growth in unassigned fund balance coupled with a solid, steady amount that we can assign for future liabilities. But if we're looking for some funds, that would be where I would look. But the point, I guess the point I'm making is at the end, if the joint special has contracts that total up to the 16 plus the 12.5 plus the 8.5, then you're gonna have to have funding sources to keep that work going. But you could agree in spirit, and hopefully a little bit more than spirit, that you're not gonna move savings in the middle school bond to some other thing other than cutting it, cut the 10 down to 8. There's another component, and it's a lot of money. It's probably $250,000 of unspent proceeds of the bond we sold for Franklin Street. That could certainly be repurposed. The question is, do you want to do that? That's a public hearing. So mechanically, you could bring the 8.5 down to 8.5 minus what you think the final savings are, and you could reduce the bond. Yeah, I think you brought that up maybe 2 joint specials ago, which is good. But it is a process, because the bondholders basically bought up bonds to construct the Franklin Street building. Now, you've authorized that. Now you're asking us to take those funds and move them potentially to the elementary school project. So it's a lot to digest, but I'd be certainly happy to answer any other questions.
Could I please have a follow-up?
Follow-up, Alderman Sullivan?
Thanks. So to your point on the bond that went to Franklin Street, I don't know when that got approved. I'm sure you probably know that right off the top of your head. But would it be fair to say that if we sold that entire bond, is the interest rate the same? I mean, do you know where are you following my logic here? So if we went there and there's less, we're getting that at a better rate than we're getting this, then there's some savings there. So why wouldn't we follow through on that bond and say, look, we can get this money cheaper as opposed to this $4 million at this interest rate, which is gonna cost us X amount on a principal and interest on top of that. So that's what my follow-up is.
Sure, I'd have to check. That was 2 years ago, that bond sale. It's going to be percentage differences, but every percent's an important percent. But using bond proceeds is a good thing for projects that are similar, and I would say school buildings are similar. You're not going to take elementary school or Franklin Street School bond proceeds and use them for something else. Because the intent of the bondholders was to build schools. But the percentages, I mean, we're getting a little bit down into the calculations, but certainly if we borrowed that money at 3.2% and this bond's gonna be 4.1, there are savings. And it's used effectively. The final accounting is gonna be, the bond of $5 million is gonna be used by the city, and the debt service is gonna show up as Franklin Street. But it's at the rate that we locked in back 2 years ago.
Yeah. Thank you.
So just one other thing, we generated this list so that you'd have areas to look at for reducing the amount of money that we're gonna spend. But the must-haves were considered extremely important. Like, we don't do the roof, it's already leaking. We're doing all this work inside the school, and it's going to be impacted by the leaking. Does that make sense? And those 2 roofs are in the capital improvements plan for 2024 at $5 million. This is doing the 2 roofs for $2 million. So, something to consider, you know. As he explained, there's a lot of reasons why it's less expensive to do it now. If you want to cut some of these other things out, fine. But I think the roofs, the PDA, they're pretty much mandatory. We're gonna pay for them anyway, and do we wanna come back and have to do another bond?
I think you misunderstood me. All I said was, I am not against any of these must-haves, deferred, or whatever. I think we should do them. I'm just making a motion on how we pay for it.
Well, the other thing is with the roof, if we don't energize the roofing contractor, I think it's April, or maybe March,
You said April.
that we won't be able to get it done in the time allocated for this project. So that'll cost us more money. We can't wait till July to find out if we have money somewhere in the budget. It's too late for the roof. I mean, some of these other things we can do away with, and that's why I had this list generated. But as far as the roof's concerned, I think that's, at least in my opinion, that's something that we really need to do. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I, like Alderman Sullivan, agree that all these projects are good. I mean, I'd love to see new basketball courts there. They're needed. Obviously, the roof is critical. I think the 4 million would pay for, the roof would be part of that. It's in the must-have section. So, you know, I hate that we're put in this position of, you know, hey, kids aren't gonna have roofs if, you know, because the money was spent somewhere else. Well, you know, it's almost like a gun to our head, right? You know, what are you gonna do? You gotta put roofs on these schools that are leaking. You know, so I'm not even sure I support the 8 or the 4 million, to be honest. But my question is, and probably an easy one, is what would the 4 million get us? Would it get us all through the must-haves and the, I mean, I can add these numbers up, I suppose, but level 1 and level 2, the must-haves and the should-haves?
None of them.
None of
It
them.
only covers the windfall. It only covers.
That only covers the shortfall.
The error, yeah.
Oh. Okay, I don't know then.
Any other comments on the motion that's on the floor? All right, the motion on the floor is to cut this bond to 4.5 million rather than 8.5 million?
Yes, and the language should read to cover a shortfall of previously committed ESSER funds. Because that's not in there, and I want it to be in there.
All right, you've heard the motion. I think we ought to do this by roll call on the budget committee. Would the clerk please call the roll? Voting yea would be in favor of the motion that's on the floor. Nay would be against it.
Alderman Sullivan,
Yes.
Alderman Tebow,
No.
Alderman Senate,
No.
Alderman at Large Shoshana Kelly,
No.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wiltshire,
No.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien votes no. Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
No, motion fails. Okay, so we have one of two options. We can approve, the budget committee can approve the full 8.5 million and send it to the full board for approval. Or if anybody else would like to cut any of the other items that were listed in here, that's why I had the list generated. If you want to reduce, you know, we went, the construction committee, the joint special went through every one of these and determined them to be important to the safety and welfare of the students in those schools. And chances of us touching these schools again anytime soon is nil. We're looking at new Searles not happening until 2029. So you can imagine the next time these schools will be touched. Alderman Tebow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have any indication yet what the education budget is gonna be for coming up? Like, is there things that we can be tight on when that comes to us. Like, I know we don't decide what goes in and out of there, but we can obviously push it backwards if, we don't like it. Like, I'm looking to find other money. If we're gonna put 8 million here, can we take some off of what the school budget will be next year?
Okay, I will tell you that as far as the 4.5 million, the bond money, right now, we can pretty much guarantee 2 million from McCarthy won't be needed. It could be repurposed, or we don't spend that bond money because we've approved this bond money. It's all handled within the bond. And there's a really good chance that we will have additional savings in the McCarthy School, but we can't say right now because the school's not done. But things are going exceptionally well with the McCarthy School. The contractor's done an amazing job of doing things under budget, and are saving us money left and right. You know, by the way, just so we all know that Harvey Construction has done an outstanding job in all our schools. And they're always selected because they're the low bidder, and we have a phenomenal history with them. So it's not like we're just appointing them. They still have to bid it, and they still have to be a low bidder.
Thank you.
But, you know, like I said, there's a really good chance that we may have enough so that the bond monies for the 4.5 million are gonna balance somewhat. I can't tell you exactly how much, I'm not a mind reader, but we still have things to do at McCarthy School. They're not entirely done, but between the weather and everything helping us, things are going exceptionally well. And, so, anyway. So there's things that we could take out of here. We could take out and not give Birch Hill a new sign. We could not do the sidewalks in the front of the school. They're in terrible shape at both schools, actually, tripping hazards, but we don't have to do them. It's not part of the original scope of the project. We don't have to put the fence in to keep the kids from running out of the playground into the woods and have the teachers chase after them. We don't have to do that. So, I mean, the motion that we have to address now is, do we do the full bond? And by the way, if we do the bond for 8.5 million, if we get to the point where some of these things don't have to be done, we won't do them, and we won't ever have to sell that bond money. But you need to have that bond authorization, as Mr. Griffin already explained, so that you can at least plan for the work. As there are additional savings, you don't bond that. Wilshire?
Yes, thank you. If we're fairly certain that we're gonna have $2 million, maybe more, of the McCarthy bond, why don't we reduce this bond to $6.5 million?
That's somewhat feasible, but I guess it would be the timing and the shift. Mr. Griffin, do you want to address that timing and what would have to be done?
Yes, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. The issue you're facing right now is you need $8.5 million to sign contracts to get work done. You could be aggressive and simultaneously ask to rescind the bond from 10 million to 8 at the McCarthy, but I'd like to rescind it once, so hopefully there's $4 million in savings, and then everything matches, and you'll probably, you can't help but take another look at some of the things that you're doing. I mean, it's been brought up tonight that how would you, I mean, I'm going through that right now with my home. So I want to do a bunch of things simultaneously, and I want to take a breather and not have contractors over my house all the time. But I think the sentiment is here that, geez, is there any way we can find that $4.5 million? We know there's going to be other projects. We have that committee that's going to unveil itself next Tuesday. But you definitely need funding to be able to enter into agreements. whether it's the things you already wanted to do, add the roofs, and then the other alternates. So you can't, contractors and other people, you can't really tie them up on a hope. And I think that's why we're here tonight, so thank you.
Alderman excuse me. Alderman Sullivan?
I'd like to make a motion to amend R 24-005, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $6.5 million to fund additional costs for the building and to cover the shortfall of the ESSER funds. And I'd like to speak to it, please.
Alderman Sullivan?
Understanding what everything just got said, but $4.5 million gets us ESSER back. It gets us a roof, and it gets us a bi-directional antenna system, affectionately known as a BDA. And I'd like to make that motion by roll call, please.
Okay. Before we have the roll call, is there any discussion on that motion? Alderman Wiltshire?
I don't want to nickel and dime this, take out this 20,000, take out this 30,000. It doesn't make sense. You know, if we're doing this project, we should do it right. You know, I just thought because we had $2 million that we could count on from the McCarthy project, we could, you know, count on that money. But since we can, I'm gonna fully support the 8.5.
So just from a strategic standpoint, if we only pass 6.5 here, we have a $2 million saving to McCarthy, they don't automatically translate. We can't use that money for these things in the elementary schools without transferring it, getting rid of the $2 million in the McCarthy school and allocating that $2 million back here. So again, the process, Mr. Griffin?
Yes, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer Tax Collector. It's the fact that we hadn't sold the 10 million McCarthy contingency is for just this reason. Hopefully there's savings. If you approve enough money to enter into contracts that aren't the 8.5 but the 6.5, we're not going to have any. I don't think you want me to sell $10 million worth of a middle school bond and then repurpose that money over here. It's gonna, there's a few public hearings and so forth. It's clunky. We haven't sold any of this bond yet, so we've got the 16 million. We got $26 million that need to be sold. We always are conservative on selling in case projects get stopped, and then you've got all this money and you get into IRS arbitrage situations. So we're always bonding when the project is in very good shape. We've sold the entire $118 million bonds in the middle school, knowing that we put that $10 million in reserve just in case. And it was pretty clear when we went through that bond that we were gonna spend some of it. So that's kind of where we're at. But at 6.5, you're not gonna be able to sign contracts to total 8.5. And you're gonna have to wait until the McCarthy. What I'm recommending is a rescinding of a portion of that bond, not selling it and then repurposing it. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
So if I understand that, we would rescind $2 million of the McCarthy School, which reduces the city's allocation for bond, but pass the $8.5 million so that we have the authority to do what we need to do here.
Correct.
And then, all right. Alderman T-Bone?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The comment is basically, we're still selling the bond. Even if we're rescinding one, we still have to sell the bond here. It's not, we can't just move it over. We haven't spent that money. We haven't we haven't gone out and sold the bond, so.
Correct.
Even though it looks like a $2 million savings or whatever, but it's not real money. We're not taking money from here, putting it here, and that takes care of it. And we can now pay the contractors. So it doesn't really work that way, even though we would love it to. We would love to just grab money here and put it here. But in this case, that's not gonna work, so.
Correct.
I don't know if I can support that either, so.
Any other comments on the motion that's on the floor? Alderman Kelly?
I want to echo the full funding of this at $8.5 million. I think that the conversations we've had tonight are really great for accountability. I think we all at this for sure listening to the ways that we can look at and make sure that we continue to be smart about how we bond money in the future. But we've also in the city had a history of not doing infrastructure projects properly, where we're looking at the long-term goal of this. And if we are, penny wise and pound foolish, we're gonna pay triple for radon mitigation in 3 years. One of the things, none of these things that are actually in the scope are nice to have. So we're not putting in couches and none of these are actual luxury items. These are things that the kids need for our schools to be healthy, productive places for our learners. And so while I understand the frustrations and implications and all of those things, if we continue to do deferred maintenance and deferred don't do this, it just continues to actually cost us more. So I'm gonna fully support the 8.5 million, and I would really looking forward to the work that's gonna be done by the ad hoc committee in terms of looking at all of the different projects and how we can come in under budget.
Any other comments?
Please.
Oh, Alderman Sullivan?
I'd like to withdraw my motion, please, to
To what?
table. I'd like to withdraw my motion to amend.
All right, motion's withdrawn. The motion on the floor right now is the passing of the 8.5 million to complete the Birch Hill, Maine Dunstable projects. If there's no further discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Alderman Sullivan,
No.
Alderman Tebow,
Yeah.
Alderman Senate,
Yes.
Alderman Kelly, Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
Yes. Alderman O'Brien votes yea. And Alderman Dowd.
Yes. Motion passes and will be referred to the full board. It may, I don't know if it's on the agenda for tomorrow night. I know it's not on? Okay.
No.
So it'll be the meeting after that. All right, new business resolutions,
There are none?
new business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee, none.
Nada.
General discussion. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did say yes to that, and I just wanted to explain that I do want to see it go to the full board and see what other aldermen and alderwomen think after hearing, hopefully listening to this, or at least looking at some notes on this meeting. And some of them are here, actually, so I'll be curious to see what they think. But I'm still reserving my right to change my opinion when it comes to the full board, but I wanted to make sure that it did get there, so thank you.
Okay, Alderman Sullivan?
And before it's printed on the headline, front page of the Nashua Telegraph, that Alderman Sullivan doesn't approve of funding schools. I just, I would like that reporter to go back to the record that says, I support all of it. I just wasn't in favor of how we paid for it. That was it. Thanks.
So I will comment that you have been an outstanding member of the Joint Special School Building Committee and appreciate all your work that you've put into it.
I appreciate that. So if there's a reporter listening, make sure you get that on the record, please.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the new committee that was put together and just request that, I think most of them are on the budget committee, so if you guys can keep us apprised of how that work is going as we go through into budget committee, I'd just be interested in knowing what all of you guys are working on.
By the way, I know what you're gonna, I was gonna say something, I'm gonna let Alderman Wilshire say it.
Well, they will be public, we'll be meeting in here, so
Yeah.
you'll be able to, figure out what we're doing.
Alderman Cleve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on this committee, didn't get a chance to vote. I 100% support everything everybody's done here, including Alderman Sullivan's comments about we need to find that funding. I don't have an issue that we did the 8.5 million. I do think we should rescind or reduce, however we do the other bond. So at least on paper, it looks like we're not over getting ourselves into too much debt and having this other thing. But I do think that we should continue, even if it does get approved at the board, look for other sources of this fund to pay down this, or to perhaps rescind it in the future. I didn't mean that in passing when I sent to the superintendent to please pen a letter and send a letter, have it on record that we have our hand out and we're looking for any excess funds that they would have. I think everybody that's part of this needs to look, you know, in the couch cushions and so on for every penny we possibly can to help reduce this. So that's just a comment I want to make. Thank you.
Anyone else? Just want to say a couple of things. I've been working on Nashua school systems for 24 years. And when we get to touch a school like this, it's not touched again for a long, long, long time. And separate projects funded under deferred maintenance. I remember 20 years ago working with the finance person at the school department. And at that time, it was said that deferred maintenance for the 20 buildings the school department has should be $1 million a year. We don't even come close to that. Some years spent $100,000. One year it was $100,000. We had to replace a pump at Nashua High South. That one pump cost $90,000. What's Mr. Smith supposed to do with maintaining the rest of the schools? The last couple of years, we've given him enough money where he can attack some of these projects. But if you look in the capital improvements, you'll see all the things that aren't getting done. And that's because when we touch a school, we need to get it done then. If we don't, not gonna happen. And the other thing is, you know, as far as like the gymnasium, to me, it's an equity thing. We've gone out of our way, especially with the middle school project, looking at equity across all 3 schools so that nobody has more than someone else, especially building a new school. And that's been critically important as part of the culture of the school system. Another point I want to say is, recently in our meetings, the 2 principals from Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable, where the kids now have moved over into the new section, the kids are all smiles. They love it. They can't believe how quiet things are now. It used to be all open concept. And it's brighter, cleaner. They have lockers. And we're going to have a tour of the school so you can get to see them. But you've seen pictures if you look at the status reports that we get from Harvey every joint special. Schools are amazing. And if it's helping the kids as far as education, that's important. So, you know, the only other point I want to make is there are a lot of other things that came up to do. The principals come up with a list of things. The one that strikes me the most is they had one area of the school they didn't like the color. They wanted to change the paint. No. And there are other things that we've said no to. These things that are on this list, we felt were important. You know, I was not really crazy about the fence until I found out that kids are running into the woods and that was a problem. And again, safety. So that's where we're at, and we will see where it goes. All right, now it's public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in public comment? Please give your name and address.
Laura Cahoon, 30 Greenwood Drive. First of all, let's remember something. The city got $45 million in ESSA funds, okay? Of that, the city of Nashua got 10%, Manchester got 13%, and then the state divided it through every other school district in the state. But we got 10, which was a very large amount. Our current budgets are like 176, our bonds are $130 million. So we're at $306 million for our schools. I think Mr. Donovan, I'm sorry to say this, you should either resign or get fired. It's not out, it shouldn't be the taxpayers' fault that they can't keep track of $45 million. I found 2 things within the bills that the school gave the state. One was 1.98 for educational services for teachers. I found also another one where they took the gym teacher and divided his salary between north and south. I think this is ridiculous, especially seeing how we have additional funds of $5.5 million at year-end June 2023 that were not used. Mr. Griffin should know better too about the bonds, because the Broad Street bond for many years had an extra $6 million that we were taking out to pay Eversource, this, that, and the other thing. But apparently 2 years ago we needed it, so we took out the majority of it. But it still has a balance of $1 million. So there's a lot of bond statements that we have on that we have not used that could be reassigned to something else, okay? As far as Harvey's concerned, I still think we should take it back from him, go out and get somebody else. We have paid Harvey Construction, not their subcontractors, just Harvey Construction, for the last 3 years, $110 million, okay? He should have known that they were codes on that they needed a certain code to be put on, you know, roofs and stuff like that. I personally do not think he should be doing the roofs. We should go out and get another bid. Maybe he knows too many people in City Hall, and he gets the contracts that way. I think it's about time we got rid of Harvey and got somebody else in here that maybe is a little bit more honest and has more reasonable pricing. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. Laura takes no prisoners. I think everyone in this room does have the best interest of the students at heart. Everyone, behind me and in front of me. And the debate is about funding. And for me, the important thing was about process. And I heard some things here that really piqued my interest. You know, when the Board of Aldermen discussed this, there was a lot of beatdown on the school district for not handling things right. And they showed up here tonight to put themselves in the hot seat and answer the questions, which is great. But Alderman Jetty pointed out that it's not just the school district, it's the JSSBC, and in part the aldermen who had played a role. And I did hear Mr. Donovan say that May-June timeframe, there were small group of people, 4 people, including, he believed, Alderman Dowd, that became aware of this. Now, it doesn't appear between that summer time frame, it took until the last meeting of the JSSBC December for this to come out. And Mr. Donovan mentioned that he wasn't certain there was anything ever put in writing, it was just done verbally. Why wasn't there something put in writing when they figured this out in the early summer? This should have been a memorandum that said priority high, documented and sent to everybody. This wasn't a quiet phone call that shouldn't be documented anywhere and given to everybody and given to the JSSBC immediately. And I am very interested, Alderman Dowd, in when you exactly did know and why it took that gap, because you're the leader. And I have a very specific interest based on some questions I was asking about spending in the fall that were not answered, I don't think, properly now. But I know the answer to my question. It was political year. It was political season. Would it have been appropriate? Would the parties in power have wanted a letter coming out saying 4.5 million was not accounted for properly and we need to bond another, and the roofs aren't right, we need to bond another 8.5 million in August or September as people are filing for seats? I don't think so. I think this waited until December to come out, until after the election. And then it was safe. I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday, and I don't think any of you did either. This was a political issue, which prevented the documentation from being done and the letter from being written that should have gone to all of you in the JSSBC in writing with priority high. Here's what's going on with the money.
30 seconds.
So I would encourage all of you to point a finger at yourselves and your process in this chamber, because you definitely pointed a finger at the school leaders behind me, and they stood in the hot seat and took it. Now it's time for you to stand in the hot seat and take it too. Thank you.
know, I said I was gonna retire from this, but I guess I haven't. Paula Johnson, I still live in Nashville. I wanna say, first of all, I wanna say thank you to everybody here for asking good questions. Unfortunately, you're spending the money. I wanna thank Alderman Sullivan for trying to make motions to see what he can do, and the Alderman from Ward 8, thank you very much. I know we haven't agreed on a lot of things, but you know, when we do, we do. And there shouldn't be any reason why we can't walk away as friends at the end. I worked with a lot of people in the school district. I worked with Mr. Donovan and Dr. Andre, and I have the utmost respect for them. When I sat here for budget, I told them why I wouldn't vote on the budget, but I still respected them. But if you go back and you look at some of the answers here on my questions, back to senior management when everything was going on here still was, you had Dr. McKinney and that crew. Okay. And Ms. Alderwoman Timmons was on the board with me. I mean, we respected everybody, but there were things that went on a lot of us didn't know. And I will tell you, I didn't know about this, because if I did, I would have been outraged about it. Because I always keep people's, like I said, taxpayer advocate for that, people's in mind. And to think that we have to come up with additional funds. And again, Alderman Dowd, it really rests on you. You're the chair of JSSBC. If you knew about this, this should have been brought up before now. If there's something this important, it should have been talked about. And we shouldn't at the 11th hour here. Everything's at the 11th hour in this city. We need a new sign, it's the 11th hour. We need more money, it's the 11th hour. This should have been a roundtable discussion a while ago and talking about this. And to have these committees and not invite members of the public to sit on these committees, you know, you can't get anything under the right to know law here in the city because it's called the right not to know for the residents of this city. And it's really sad. And you can sit and smile and smirk or whatever you want. But you know what? You're elected to represent we the people. And we forgot about that. And that was one of the biggest things when I was elected. I tried to represent the people. I tried to get to every meeting I could. And you know, I'll tell you, there was a meeting in Ward 5 that had to do with the corridor. And that's very important.
30 seconds.
Because our buses are gonna go down there. I will commend Alderman Clee for being there. But none of the other aldermen at large were there. And when I was an alderman at large, I made every meeting, even if it was 3 meetings, and Alderman Wilshire knew about that. I was at every meeting. And nobody came, and the only one who answered me in the email was Alderman O'Brien, said he was not well, and I said, I hope you feel better. But no other alderman.
Time.
Shame on all of you. And some of you want to be an executive counselor. Shame on you.
Anyone else? Public comment? All right, we're done. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the corridor for the Ward 5, I was actually at a meeting covering Alderman Jetty, because that's his ward, so he has to be there. So that's why I wasn't there. I was at a city hall meeting. But I just want to thank the school and Harvey and the superintendent and Mr. Donovan. I know Mr. Donovan's getting a lot of heat, but Superintendent Andrade is his boss, so I think he's got to take some of the heat too. So I feel bad that Mr. Donovan got most of it. So you know, both of them should be accountable for it. So I'm not asking for anybody obviously to be fired. I think that was harsh. But I do want to thank them for coming out tonight, and I appreciate them standing here and answering our questions. Same thing with Harvey and Mr. Smith and Mr. Griffin, Director Griffin, CFO Griffin. And I want to thank Alderman Dowd, who I know this is not the easiest job to be chair of the budget or the chair of the JSSBC. You know, I hold the JSSBC court, you know, accountable too, except they got to know about it. So if only one person knew about it, I can't blame all of them. They don't know about it. So it was hard to turn that on them when I know just about all of them didn't know it. So, you know, again, I just want to commend you on this. I know it's hard. I know you've been doing schools for a long time. I think you were there when they put Mount Pleasant in. But thank you for all that your leadership is, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to kind of build upon what Alderman Tebow was saying, you know, I think in situations like this where there's a lot of unknowns, sort of the human inclination is to look for a place to place blame. And I don't think it's one person or one entity here. There's a lot of moving parts to this. You know, there's a lot of moving parts to these funds that came out of COVID. I mean, fortunately, I only ever had to get a PPP loan forgiven for a private entity. I'm sure ESSER blows that out of the water, but you know, I certainly want to echo the appreciation of the folks from the school district coming, Mr. Donovan, Superintendent Andre, and you know, these are the tough discussions that we have to have. These are the tough questions that we have to ask, and you know, we're here. We've voted on it again. Now we need to look inward and just do what we can to make sure it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, to my colleague here to the left, Alderman Dowd has been around for a long time, but Mount Pleasant is going to have their 100th year anniversary in next year, so I don't think was quite there when it was built. And the first one was built, I think, in 1849. So, but all kidding aside, in doing my homework, I want to say that I spoke to President Bishop relative to a lot of this stuff, and she made a comment that's really resonated with me, and I'm actually hearing it from my colleagues, is we're at the point where trying to blame someone is just not going to get us anywhere. I think people have come up and said, you know, next time I would do this as a lesson learned and so on. It doesn't help the taxpayers when it comes to having to, you know, knowing that this is something that a mistake has happened. I do think that you know, people have come up and explained it and so on. I did speak to Mr. Griffin as well relative to the bond. You know, why can't we take that $2 million from the, you know, we know it's going to be left over and so on. And he explained to me it's not money that we have. It's just money that we thought we were going to spend, but we're not going to spend it. So as he pointed out, we would reduce the other bond. I think everybody has come forward. I truly appreciate Mr. Donovan, who really was on the hot seat. You explained everything as well as possible. So thank you so much for sitting there and letting us grill you as we did, and having the public say the things that they did. I know it's never easy when you hear that. But I also understand the passion of the public too. They're looking at tax bills that have been very high, and well, I think that their anger is misplaced and so on. I think we're going to do better. I think we're going to find some of that fund to help reduce this 8.5. But as it was said, we have to commit that money now, or we can't get any of the work done. We can't. They're not going to do it on a promise. So we have to show good faith by doing the 8.5, approving it. And so for the public to know, we're approving the 8.5. We will probably spend close to the 8.5, but hopefully we'll have other places that we can technically reduce the obligation of that 8.5. And I really hope that it looked hard. It was serious when I said about, you know, turning the couch cushions over and, you know, sending letters to Concord with our hands out and Maya Copa if necessary. But thank you. And Alderman Dowd, you do not look 100 years old, so, or 99 either.
Lately, it felt like 80 with that respiratory thing, but
I can imagine.
anyone else? Us, Alderman Timmons.
Thank you,
Alderman
Chairman.
Timmons.
Thank you, that's okay. I just want to thank Mr. Donovan for all the years I worked with him. He's been phenomenal. And please, do not resign, and we're not firing you. And Mr. Smith as well. Javi has been fantastic. We need you, Javi, to stay right where you. Hope you didn't take it personally. I don't think it's really personally directed at you or me or anybody, and this frustration is frustration. And Mr. Griffin, congratulations, you know why. But I just want you to know that I've been working with these gentlemen for a long time, and they are phenomenal. And they keep our school up and current, and I just respect them. And anybody that know Mr. Donovan does look out for the best interest of our school. And he got up here and said he made some mistakes. Who don't make mistakes? Who don't? Guess, you know, those who make mistakes, they stand up, raise your hand. I don't make mistakes. This is just simply not true. But thank you, Mr. Donovan. Thank you, Sean Smith, and thank you, Mr. Griffin, and you too, Jim Bishop and Dr. Andre. You guys are doing what you need to do to keep our schools going, and I'm glad that that 8.5 was approved. And as far as our chairman for Joint Special School Board, you're really good. You know where every brick is buried, every stone is turned. You know everything. And I was really afraid that you might not have won because we would never have another Richard Dow, and your replacement wouldn't have been able to do it. So, and I don't mean the replacement you were running against anybody else that was running for the chair for Joint Special. That's what I mean. Not that you wouldn't be able to do it, Lori, but I'm just saying that we do have an incredible crew, and I appreciate all of you guys, all of you.
Anyone else? Alderman Wiltshire.
I want to echo what she said.
Yeah, and, you know, it's, there's a lot going on. We just went through one of the largest school building projects when you take into account Franklin Street, the three middle schools, the 2 elementary schools. You know, it's just a ton of work, and it's a lot to keep track of. And, you know, is everything perfect? As she just said, no, it's not perfect, but we try to make it as close to perfect as possible. I think we've made a hell of a lot of good decisions on the McCarthy School, and I think we're in great shape. And the only other thing I want to say is there was nothing political about anything that's done on the Joint Special. That is not something that anybody should leverage when we're talking about taking care of our children. All right. Motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:57.
Who wants the meeting?